What if the American Revolution never truly ended? The ball of freedom isn't just a symbol. It's a journey through time, through bloodshed, through promises made and broken. This is the full story of America's greatest contradiction, a nation founded on liberty while denying it to millions. From the fiery speeches of 1776 to the enslaved hands that built the Capitol, from Civil War battlegrounds to modern-day movements still marching for equality, this video uncovers the untold chapters of a revolution that remains unfinished. Step into the shadows of history and meet the forgotten voices, rebels, reformers, and everyday citizens who carried the flame of freedom when institutions failed them. Witness how the ball of freedom rolled through eras of change, resistance, and reckoning. This isn't the story from your textbook. It's the raw, unfiltered truth that ties America's founding ideals to its ongoing fight for justice. Whether you're a student of history or someone searching for deeper meaning in today's struggle for civil rights, this video connects past to present like never before. Watch until the end. You'll never look at the American Revolution the same way again. They told us America was born in freedom, but from the first breath it was choking on contradiction. A nation founded on liberty, drafted in ink and blood, while human beings were chained just outside the halls of its creation. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't revisionism. This is the story we were never meant to see clearly, because if we did, we might start asking who freedom was really for. From the very beginning, America spun a legend. 13 colonies breaking free from a tyrant king, waving flags and firing muskets for independence. But what did freedom mean when enslaved black people had no rights, when women couldn't vote, when native nations were being erased from the map? The ink on the Declaration dried before the bodies in the fields were even acknowledged as human. Still they sang of liberty. Still they called it revolution. The truth is, the myth was never just about what happened. It was about what needed to be believed. America's founding was marketed like a product, clean, righteous, inevitable. Heroes like Washington and Jefferson were placed on pedestals so high no one could see the shadows beneath them. The plantations, the slaves, the brutal calculations dressed up as democracy. The story was always too neat. And that neatness, it was design, not accident. But something strange happened. The people America tried to exclude never stopped believing in freedom. Enslaved men and women whispered it to each other in the dark. Native voices kept it alive in songs banned by colonizers. Immigrants clung to it in languages that filled factory floors. The very people denied the dream held onto it tighter than those who claimed to own it. It was as if the ball of freedom kept rolling even when the system tried to stop it. This is not a story about tearing America down. It's about seeing it clearly, in all its glory and disgrace. The greatness of America isn't in pretending it got everything right. It's in the struggle of the people who knew it didn't, and fought to make it better anyway. Real patriotism is in the protest, not the parade. So as we begin this journey, remember, the ball of freedom is not a relic, it's a test, a challenge passed down through generations. And it's still rolling, scarred and heavy, but moving. The question isn't whether freedom was promised. The question is, who has had to bleed to collect on that promise? They wrote, "We the people," but not all people were meant to be included. Behind the poetic preamble of the Constitution lies one of the most staggering hypocrisies in human history, that the architects of liberty were also the engineers of bondage. Jefferson wrote about self-evident truths, yet enslaved over 600 people. Madison helped design checks and balances, while profiting from a system that denied the most basic human rights. The foundation was never pure. It was power wrapped in paper. The Constitution wasn't just a blueprint for democracy. It was a negotiation, a deal between slaveholding states and those who tolerated them. It allowed slavery to persist. It counted the enslaved as 3/5 of a person for representation, but not for rights. It protected the ownership of human lives under the euphemism of property, and still it was hailed as a miracle of governance. How do you celebrate such brilliance knowing it was built to exclude? It wasn't ignorance, it was intention. The Founding Fathers weren't unaware of slavery's horror. They were aware enough to write carefully around it. They knew that freedom for all would shatter their fragile coalition, so they compromised. They chose unity over justice, power over principle. The original sin of America wasn't just slavery, it was the deliberate decision to legalize it, to bury it beneath noble words, and to hope no one would dig it back up. And yet, even then, resistance smoldered. Enslaved people found ways to learn to read, risking torture to unlock the meaning behind those sacred texts. Abolitionists dared to speak truth in public squares where mobs waited with ropes and fire. And still, the Constitution endured, praised not for what it was, but for what people hoped it could become. It became a battleground, not just between North and South, but between myth and reality. America never fully abolished the spirit of compromise. It kept choosing silence over reckoning, erasure over accountability. That choice echoes through generations, in broken school systems, in prison walls, in laws designed to protect the powerful and punish the poor. We talk about rights as if they were granted equally. But the truth? Rights in America have always been fought for, not freely given. And so we ask again, who is we the people? Who was counted? Who was left behind? The ball of freedom kept rolling even through blood and betrayal, because some believed, despite everything, that the Constitution wasn't a promise fulfilled, but a promise waiting to be claimed. The Civil War ended with cannon smoke and surrender, but what followed was something far more dangerous than war: the illusion of healing. America stood at a crossroads, to reconstruct or to reinvent the very idea of freedom. For a moment, there was light. Enslaved people walked free. Families reunited. Black men voted and held office. It was the closest America came to becoming the country it claimed to be. And that's exactly why it had to be crushed. Reconstruction was not just a political experiment. It was a threat to the myth. If Black Americans could rise, could govern, could educate their children and own land, then the lie that white supremacy was necessary began to collapse. So the backlash came fast and brutal. The Ku Klux Klan rose not in the shadows, but in broad daylight. White mobs burned black towns, lynched leaders, and terrorized voters. The South didn't just lose the war, it rewrote its defeat into a new narrative of victimhood and states' rights. The federal government, once a shield, backed away. Promises of protection were traded for political gain. The Compromise of 1877 ended Reconstruction, withdrawing federal troops from the South and allowing white supremacy to reassert control. It wasn't a quiet betrayal. It was public policy. Jim Crow didn't arrive out of nowhere. It was the inheritance of a nation too scared to complete its transformation. Education, land ownership, and Black autonomy were dismantled piece by piece. Segregation became law, and violence became normal. The hope of Reconstruction wasn't just abandoned, it was buried. But still, people resisted. Freedmen's schools kept teaching in secret. Black churches became safe havens and political engines. Underground newspapers carried the fire forward. The ball of freedom rolled, slow and wounded, but unstoppable. What America feared most was not rebellion. It was realization. The realization that equality was possible, that Black progress wasn't a threat, but a fulfillment, that Reconstruction didn't fail. It was sabotaged. The unfinished revolution was shelved, not solved, and the consequences didn't stay in the past. They calcified into the bones of the country. Reconstruction wasn't just a period in history. It was a question posed to America. Will you finish what you started? The answer, whispered in courthouse steps and burned into black churches, was not yet. But the question remains, louder than ever. They called it the Civil Rights Movement, but it wasn't just a movement. It was a war fought without guns, where children were foot soldiers and hope itself was the weapon. America likes to remember the dream, the speeches, the songs of peace, but too often it forgets the nightsticks, the dogs, the bombs, the bruises. Behind every black and white photo of nonviolence stood a nation willing to brutalize those asking only for the rights they'd been promised centuries earlier. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, but he also had death threats stacked on his desk. Rosa Parks sat down, but she was not alone. There were thousands walking miles to work during bus boycotts, organizing in secret, risking everything. School children were jailed for marching. Churches were bombed with people inside. And all the while, the country asked them to be more patient, more polite, as if justice had a waiting list. This wasn't just the South's story. Northern cities burned, too. Discrimination dressed itself in northern suits and suburban redlining, in police batons and media silence. Malcolm X spoke of chickens coming home to roost, not as prophecy, but as a warning America refused to hear. The myth of American equality was cracking, and beneath it, people were bleeding. And yet, with all of it, they kept pushing. Sit-ins turned into legislation. Marches turned into televised reckonings. From Selma to D.C., the world watched, and for a brief, shining moment, America blinked. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, legal victories carved out of decades of suffering. It felt like the promise might finally arrive. But a law is not a cure. A signature is not transformation. After King was assassinated, the dream didn't die. It fractured. The momentum faded, replaced by Nixon's law and order, by COINTELPRO's sabotage of black leaders, by the quiet return of systems dressed in new language. America learned how to nod while denying, how to smile while still suppressing. The dream became a quote, not a goal. But for those who marched, those who bled, the ball of freedom never stopped rolling. They handed it off, often in silence, to the next generation, because they understood something vital. The dream doesn't live in marble monuments. It lives in the people willing to risk everything for justice, again and again. Slavery ended. Jim Crow fell. But America didn't dismantle its systems of racial control. It redesigned them. The chains didn't vanish. They were made invisible, buried beneath legislation and court rulings, wrapped in the language of law and order. The plantation became the prison. The overseer became the officer. And the whip was replaced by mandatory minimums. Today, the United States holds more prisoners than any other country in the world. Over 2 million people, disproportionately black and brown. This isn't a coincidence. It's the result of decades of policies that targeted communities of color. From the war on drugs to 3-strike laws, America found new ways to cage those it once enslaved. And it did so with terrifying efficiency. In the 1980s, crack cocaine ravaged inner cities. But the response wasn't treatment, it was punishment. Black users were sentenced far more harshly than white users of powder cocaine. In the 1990s, the crime bill exploded prison populations, flooding poor neighborhoods with police and stripping ex-prisoners of voting rights, housing, and employment. A conviction became a life sentence, even after the cell door opened. This system doesn't just trap individuals, it cripples entire communities. Children grow up with parents behind bars. Schools are underfunded while prisons are privatized. Neighborhoods are over-policed and underprotected, and all the while politicians declare victory over crime as if handcuffs heal trauma, as if cages cure poverty. But people started noticing. Books like The New Jim Crow, documentaries like 13th, and Voices from Within the System began to break through. Formerly incarcerated people spoke out. Movements like hashtag Close Rikers and hashtag End Cash Bail gained ground. The myth that prisons were about justice cracked, revealing a deeper truth. They were about control. Mass incarceration didn't happen by accident, and it won't end by accident either. It will take more than reform. It will take a reckoning, because the ball of freedom cannot roll freely when millions are behind bars for the crime of being born on the wrong side of history. We speak of freedom like it's a universal gift, but in America, freedom has always had a gatekeeper. From its founding, this country drew invisible lines, defining who gets to belong, who gets to thrive, and who gets left behind. It wasn't just Black Americans who were excluded. The promise of liberty has dodged entire peoples, entire histories, in silence. Indigenous nations were the first to face the contradiction. Their lands stolen, their treaties broken, their languages nearly erased by boarding schools that punished culture and replaced it with shame. They were citizens in name, but ghosts in policy. Freedom for them meant survival on stolen soil within a system that tried to forget them, and still they resisted. They held ceremonies in secret. They occupied Alcatraz. They marched for water, for land, for recognition. Their fight is not past tense. For immigrants, the ball of freedom rolls uphill. The Statue of Liberty promises refuge, but immigration policy often delivers rejection. From the Chinese Exclusion Act to internment camps for Japanese Americans, to ICE raids in modern neighborhoods, the message has been clear. Freedom may speak English, but it often doesn't understand accents. And for undocumented people, the dream becomes a risk, where any knock at the door might mean separation, detention, or deportation. And what of women? For centuries, their rights were a footnote, their labor unacknowledged, their voices muted. From denied suffrage to forced sterilizations, the promise of equality came late and conditional. And still today, in boardrooms, courtrooms, and even their own homes, the question lingers: who truly controls their freedom? Then there are LGBTQ+ Americans, for whom freedom was long a secret. Love was illegal. Identity was criminalized. Rights were won not through kindness, but through protest, through Stonewall, through AIDS activism, through battles in courts and classrooms. Progress has come, but with backlash at every step, as if freedom granted can always be taken away. So again we ask, whose freedom? Whose story gets told? The ball of freedom rolls through many hands, but it is not shared equally, and until it is, America cannot claim completion. It can only claim effort. Freedom doesn't ask politely. It demands. It marches. It chants. It shuts down streets. It kneels when the anthem plays. And in recent years, it has roared louder than ever before, because the truth is, the American Revolution never ended. It was just inherited by new hands in new streets, with old wounds still bleeding beneath the surface. When George Floyd called out for breath, the world finally heard what Black America had been saying for generations. Millions flooded the streets, not just in protest of a single murder, but of a system designed to deny dignity. From Minneapolis to London, from tiny towns to global capitals, people carried cardboard signs and centuries of pain. It was not a riot, it was an uprising, an ongoing revolt against silence, against injustice, against the polite lie that everything was fine. But with every step forward, resistance grows. Laws are passed to suppress protests. Books are banned. Histories are rewritten to erase shame. Political leaders recast justice as chaos. And still, people fight. because the ball of freedom has momentum, pushed by those who refuse to wait any longer. The tools have changed. Smartphones instead of pamphlets, hashtags instead of telegrams, but the spirit remains. Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, Stop Asian Hate, Me Too. These are not trends. They are testimonies, digital records of lives that mattered, voices that would not be silenced. Movements born in grief, grown in community and aimed at transformation. The revolt is not just against police brutality or economic inequality, it's against forgetting, against pretending that America has already arrived at justice. It's a demand for truth, not just in museums or textbooks, but in policies, in prisons, in paychecks, in power. This revolt isn't temporary, it's generational, a continuation of every step taken before. Every enslaved person who dreamed of freedom, every marcher who faced a fire hose, every protester who refused to sit down. The ball of freedom rolls through them all, gathering speed, gathering strength, refusing to stop. The story of America is not one of triumph. It's one of tension, between who we say we are and who we've been, between the myth of freedom and the work of justice. And through it all, the ball of freedom keeps rolling, not because the country allows it, but because the people demand it. Today, that ball sits in all of our hands, in courtrooms where new voting laws are challenged, in classrooms where teachers dare to teach the truth, in neighborhoods where people organize, resist, rebuild. The unfinished promise of America lives in those who refuse to settle for symbolic freedom, who push for the real thing: policy, power, protection, participation. We don't get to inherit a perfect union. We inherit a flawed, bloody, beautiful experiment, one that demands our discomfort, our questioning, our courage. And make no mistake, the fight is not over. The myth of arrival is one of America's most dangerous lies. Freedom isn't something we reach, it's something we chase, together or not at all. The ball of freedom rolls because of those who push it, the forgotten, the dismissed, the disobedient, the brave. It rolls through marches, through lawsuits, through art and protest and prayers whispered in jail cells. It rolls because people believe in a version of America that has not yet existed, but could. So we end not with answers, but with responsibility. What will you do with the truth you now hold? Will you repeat the myth, or will you carry the weight of unfinished promises forward? Because the ball of freedom is still rolling. The only question that remains is whether we'll have the courage to catch it. Catch